Albondigas, let's make them.
Albondigas essentially are a Mexican meatball, and many times it's served in a caldo. I posted this exactly 1 year ago, and it's become my most popular recipe ever. I'll have the full ingredient list in the description below, but the fully detailed recipe is on my website, fretsters.com. There's many ways to make albondigas. This is my way. Shockingly, I never grew up eating this. My mom rarely made it. I don't think she ever made it, actually. So I developed this recipe by watching a ton of videos, seeing a ton of recipes for albondigas, and seeing how everyone makes it differently, and kind of added the stuff that I know I like and I would love in this recipe. And so that starts by making the meatball mixture, which is 2 pounds of ground beef, some onion, and cilantro. They don't need to be perfectly chopped. Just make sure there's not huge pieces of onion. Then we're going to add in half of that cilantro to the meatball mixture along with that half of an onion. Next, we add chipotle peppers. These already come chopped. You can also use the whole ones where you have to chop them up yourself. I love spicy food, so I add a lot of them. I added about 1/4 of a cup to the meatball mixture. And the binder for our albondigas is some rice. Some people will use cooked rice. I'm using half a cup of raw, uncooked, long grain white rice. This is going to make the meatballs so moist and tender. Then we're going to season it up with some cumin, chili powder. You can use regular chili powder, guajillo chili powder, ancho chile powder, a little bit of Mexican oregano, and a whole bunch of garlic powder because we love garlic. And like always, we season with black pepper and some salt. And lastly, we crack in 2 eggs into the meatball mixture and we start mixing it up. You can use your hand, you can use a spoon, do whatever makes you happy. And only mix it until it's all fully combined. Don't overwork the mixture. Once the mixture is fully combined, you can start making your albondigas. And then however many albondigas you get depends on how big or small you make them. I made them slightly bigger than a golf ball, which got me a total of about 22 meatballs. Some of them are slightly bigger, so you can easily get anywhere from 20 to 25 meatballs. Don't pack them too tightly. You don't want them super dense. Just pat them together until they form a ball and place them on a baking sheet. Once I had all the albondigas formed, I placed the baking sheet with the albondigas in the refrigerator while I prepared the sauce. This sauce is what's going to help flavor up our broth for the albondiga soup, and that starts with 4 Roma tomatoes. Add them in bigger chunks in there just to help up your blender. Then the other half of that onion that we used for the inside of the albondigas, and add the remaining bunch of that cilantro that we chopped up. And to help blend all of this up, I added a 16-ounce container of chicken bone broth. You can use regular chicken broth. And because I like it spicy, I'm also adding chipotle peppers to this mixture. If you don't want it spicy, don't use them here. Only use them in the meatballs, or only use them here and not in the meatballs. I then finish it off with some garlic and more Mexican oregano and blend it up until it's fully smooth and combined. And now to a big soup pot, we're going to add in another 2 containers of chicken bone broth or chicken broth. These were 16 ounces each, along with all of the sauce from that blender. This soup broth is going to change your life. It's so delicious and so easy to make. Clean out the blender with more water, and while this comes to a boil, we're going to start prepping our veggies. You can really use your favorite vegetables. I'm using a combination of some carrots, potatoes, calabacitas, and some corn. And I'm simply chopping up all the veggies into smaller chunks about 1 inch big. And I'm dividing the vegetables by how long it takes them to cook. The carrots and the potatoes take the longest to cook, so I'm going to be chopping those up together, and they're going to go into the pot together. I'm using russet potatoes because it's what I had. Normally, I would prefer Yukon Golds. I like to clean those up and leave the peels on, but I'm going to cut them in half and then cut them into smaller chunks as well, roughly the same size as the carrots. Once my soup pot started simmering, I realized I needed more broth. I added another container of chicken broth, and then slowly, one by one, we're going to plop in the albondigas. Once they're all in there, we're going to let this come to a boil, and they're going to cook for about 12 to 15 minutes before we start adding any of the vegetables. While those start cooking, we're going to prepare the corn.
These corns are big. They're like perfect for like mayonesa and queso. They're like perfect for that.
Once they're perfectly cleaned, we're going to cut these up into smaller chunks. These corns were huge, so I got 5 pieces out of each corn cob, and then set those aside.
This is a Mexican squash, a calabacita. If you can't find these, you can just use regular zucchini. It's more accessible for everyone. But I pretty much cut it in half. And then, should I do rounds or quarters? I'll do quarters.
After about 15 minutes of cooking, the albondigas will start looking like this. At this point, they're almost fully cooked, so we can start adding some of the vegetables, which are going to be the diced up potatoes and the carrots because these take the longest to cook. We're going to cook these for another 10 to 12 minutes. At this point, the pot is still on a medium-ish high heat, and we want to cook these veggies until they're fork tender. And you can start seeing that the albondigas started floating up to the top, which means that they're pretty much almost cooked. Towards the end, we add in the corn because these don't take that long to cook. I add the corn, cook it for about 5 minutes. And then it's at this point when I grabbed a little bowl just to try out the caldo to make sure it tasted good. You have to do this to make sure there's no salt or seasonings missing.
It's good.
Lastly, we're adding in the calabacitas. These cook up super quickly and they can get very mushy very fast. So add them in, cook them for about 4 to 5 minutes, and then we can turn off the heat. As I was making these, I'm like, damn, this is so easy to make. This next part is optional. I forgot it. I like to add it. It's some tomato chicken bouillon. It helps give it that lightly brighter red color. Right before serving, I'm going to start heating up some corn tortillas because I like to dip the tortilla into the caldo. Heat up the tortillas, get your bowls, and start serving up that caldo. Make sure you get plenty of vegetables, a lot of that caldo, the meatballs. I usually do 3 per bowl. I would say anywhere from 2 to 3 meatballs is a perfect serving size. And you have to make sure that each bowl gets its own piece of corn. This is so juicy, so delicious. And now this part is optional, but highly recommended. I like to serve it up with some arroz rojo. Add it straight into the bowl. I have a video for this rice here on YouTube and the recipes on my website, fretsters.com. Lastly, I'm finishing up each bowl of albondigas with some freshly chopped cilantro and a fresh squeeze of lime juice and that rolled up corn tortilla. Dip it in there. It soaks up all the juices. And that's literally it. You have a delicious bowl of comforting albondigas.
Look at that. Wow. This is better than last year. If you've never had your caldo, fideo, or anything with a corn tortilla con mayonesa, you have to start trying it out. You just heat it up, spread it with mayo, and you roll it up, and you dip it into your caldo. It's the best thing ever. You're gonna love it.